Studio B presents The Mansion in Winter. Written by Gabriel Burkum and Randall J. Bell. Read by Randall J. Bell. With recording and sound design by Patrick Musilek at Studio B in Omaha, Nebraska. This program is copyright 2016 by Gabriel Burkum and Randall J. Bell.
This is where our story begins. The year is 1895. 30 years since the war has ended. A small girl, covered in rags, trudges through the snowy cobblestone streets of a deserted town in the old state of Pennsylvania. The wind howls and bites whatever flesh it can find. The girl's memory of sunshine and warmth have all but faded away into a myth, a child's story, a fable. It is obvious that this place was abandoned years and years ago. There is not one vestige of the living, nor the dead for that matter. Hope does not exist, only a fantasy, a mirage of the life she had before. The human body and the human will are queer, aren't they? This girl hasn't seen a crumb of bread in months, and her lips have not touched the edge of a glass of milk in years. Yet she persists. What was once Main Street is now a valley of broken brick and shattered glass. Upon passing a former candy store, a smile forms over her wind-whipped lips. For a second, she is reminded of her grandmother's sweet, buttery caramels. This town is just like all the rest of the towns she has scavenged since the winter began. Empty and cold. Her only riches are the 3 matchsticks and a bit of smoked pork she carries in her pocket. However, this fount of gold will not flow forever. The girl nibbles thoughtfully on the pork as she treks onward. The cobblestone ends, and suddenly she finds that she has left the main square, as the houses become fewer and far between. Halfway turning her body, she looks back one last time. Leaving this town feels almost as good as finding it. What seems like hours go by, and nightfall approaches swiftly, like the devil himself. With each second that passes, the winter gales attack her limbs like a swarm of hornets. She must find shelter before dark. An owl hoots as she passes a large, cancerous tree near an old well. Why is there a well out here, she thought, as she surveyed her surroundings. There hasn't been shelter in sight for hours. As she reaches the top of the hill, she rallies at the sight of a large structure. A mansion. Quickly, she finds her way down the frosty terrain and approaches the home. As she draws near to the mansion, she finds the estate has been abandoned and is in a state of disrepair. 2 proud stone-carved lions guard what used to be the front gate, though now only rusted hinges remain. She slowly passes through them on the cracked stone path toward the pair of behemoth front doors and reaches for the handle. Just as her hand touches the brass latch, the door creaks loudly and opens as if by itself. Startled and confused, the young girl leans her head past the threshold into the entryway and quickly scans the premises. Nothing and no one, just as she has come to expect. Without hesitation, she swiftly but quietly enters through the doorway. The giant doors moan and echo through the great hall as they close behind her. Taking off her hood and scarf, her senses begin to awaken. The house reeks of must and earth, a blessing when compared to the tundra she has come to know so well. This place is quiet like a graveyard. Undoubtedly, she is not the first unsolicited guest this palace has seen since the owner's seemingly unplanned evacuation. The home is mostly empty, save a pair of damaged leather chairs that sit by a large chiseled mantel and a large collection of oil portraits still hanging on the walls. Like a thief in the night, the girl begins to creep around the enormous room, inspecting some of the portraits that have been so deliberately displayed. How long it must have been since she has had the great fortune of observing such art. Hypnotized, she stares into the eyes of each subject. Although lifeless, they almost positively peer back into her very soul. The chill of the frigid room disturbs her almost blissful reverie. She can almost hear her bones clicking and clacking together within her body as she shivers uncontrollably. Before her fingers lose all feeling, she springs into action, enthusiastically hunting for any substance that will hold a flame. The residence is almost completely barren, void of any remnant of life or memory belonging to its former tenants. In the main hall, the only remaining furniture are two large, lonely chairs, which sit in front of the fireplace, not unlike a pair of sturdy oak trees, firmly planted beside a mountain. Alas, after a quick inspection, she realizes that they are rotten, moldy, and wet. They will not burn. The girl brings her hands to her mouth and with a deep breath, softly blows on her blue-tipped fingers, longing for a hint of warmth. She must scavenge elsewhere. The breeze finds its way under the door, cooing like that of a newborn child. The girl peels off two long pieces of threadbare cloth she had been using to warm her neck and vigorously stuffs them between the floor and the great wooden door. The cooing is transformed into a muffled hum. A victory, however small, is still a victory. A humble smile forms on her lips as she stands up, examining her handiwork. Turning around, she is now facing the largest staircase she has ever seen. Wooden and crowded with elegant carvings. There was a child presenting his mother with a wildflower, 3 chubby cherubim floating in the heavens, and a handsome bull elk, proud and majestic. As she approaches the staircase and climbs the first step, the wooden stair groans, almost screaming through the corridor, startling her once more. Frightened, but even more determined by her numb hands, she cautiously ascends the colossal staircase. Creak by creak and echo by echo, she slowly reaches the summit, where she now beholds a sizable foyer accommodating 3 rooms. 1 room on each side, and 1 very curious room at the end of the hall. What's so curious about it? Well, it's been liberally barricaded with crude wooden boards, bulky chains, and a large, beastly bronze statue of an Iroquois war chief, mounted on horseback, no less. The girl is hardly fazed by this display and moves on to inspect the first room. Immediately, she notices a large copper bed frame, undoubtedly worth money, however inconsequential at the present moment. With no intention of lingering, she makes her way to the next room. Inside, another copper bed frame, accompanied by a grand, ornate cast-iron safe. The door of the safe is ajar, and its contents, nothing, not even a whisper. In this room, she finds nothing to entertain even the smallest spark. Exhausted, she sluggishly inches back into the hallway where she is forced to examine more closely her seemingly last option, the massively blockaded door at the end of the hallway. The icy floorboards whine and wail with each tiny step she takes toward the cluttered, hulking mass. Upon closer inspection, the idea of prying off one of the wooden ties from the wall becomes even more profitless, considering the amount of steel that had been driven through them. Her palms burn and stick to the bronze as she dauntingly attempts to maneuver the frightening statue. Not 1 inch, not 1 centimeter. It will not budge. As she tries to catch her breath, the girl glances back at the wooden blockade. Not only is it littered with nails, it has been decorated with the occasional rail spike as well. How absurd, she thought. Someone really did not want this door to open. As her pulse regains normalcy, her frustration overtakes her. Immediately, she turns around and stomps down the hallway towards the stairs like a child throwing a tantrum. Upon her descent, reaching the halfway point of the stairwell, her eyes meet the hauntingly beautiful oiled portraits once more. One of the oiled portraits depicts a woman glaring at her. Right at her. She ferociously twists the painting off the wall, smashing it into the large fireplace. The girl clumsily scrounges around in her pockets, searching for her matchsticks with success. The first stick snaps in half as she attempts to strike it alight. Hastily, she fumbles with the second stick when it suddenly slips through her petite fingers and tumbles to its fate betwixt a pair of floorboards. With the last soggy, ancient matchstick in her pocket, she strikes the coarse, plastered wall and introduces the canvas to its imminent demise. The oil paint eats the flame as she feverishly bounds about the room, gathering every remaining painting within her reach. There is no discrimination here. Whether a portrait of a small child presenting his mother with a perfectly green apple, or a meticulously crafted rendering of a fawn in the spring, she wrenches them from their respective setting and hurls them into the ever-growing volcanic abyss. Her palms outstretch, and her arms rise above her head, welcoming the warm kiss from the mantle as she gives praise to the great light. Whole seasons pass in the guise of mere minutes. Warmth fills the massive former gallery, her breath no longer visible. Light pours through the darkness, and shadows fade. The girl sheds layers and layers of colorless garments she had wrapped around her skinny body, and carefully places them on the floor, forming a crude bed for the night. The fire will only last so long, so she must gather more sustenance to burn. The nights have been growing longer and harsher. Gripping the arm of one of the rotting chairs with both hands, she begins to slowly heave it around the room, with every intention to gather the rest of the paintings. The chair, although not suitable to be sat in, serves its purpose as a footstool like a soldier at attention. As she reaches for the last painting, she hesitates. Something stops her. Silent, she stands there with an outstretched arm, hypnotized by the alluring woman in the painting. She is alarmed by a loud noise that immediately breaks her enchantment. Her feet jerk, and one of her legs tears through the molding fabric cushion. She loses her footing and plummets to the unforgiving black walnut floor, brutally twisting her ankle. Tears burst from her eyelids as she whimpers in agony. The pain is excruciating and blinding. Her ankle throbs and burns as she quietly writhes on the floor, forgetting completely the thunderous noise that had startled her in the first place. The girl's fingers tremble as she slowly inspects her injury, holding her breath as she pulls down her thick wool stocking to reveal sharp bone protruding from the flesh of her ankle. Shock sets in at the sight of her affliction, transforming the jagged pain to a dull numbness. There is little hope for walking anytime soon. Her face is as white as a ghost, and although she has long since stopped crying, her cheeks remain drenched with cool, bitter tears. She draws her arm across her face with a single stroke, partially drying her tears with her sleeve. Bending forward, she grasps the cusp of her stocking and tenderly eases it back into place. Her head points upward as she looks upon that seemingly fateful portrait. Defeated, her face turns toward the floor as she sluggishly drags herself toward the hearth. Almost there, she thought, as she draws nearer and nearer to her restful destination by the fire. The same loud noise she heard before, this time louder and accompanied by a faint snickering of what sounded like a young child. Startled and even more vulnerable than before, she jumps and twists around to see nothing but the faint glow reflecting off of the painting. Petrified by fear, she remains still and alert. What was this boom? Did she really hear a child's laughter? For hours, she remains frozen, questioning her very sanity. What was once a roaring fire has dwindled into a pitiful ember, and the room is dim. The girl lays close to the only light source and stares into every shadowy corner of the room, attempting to make out any detail at all from within her dark surroundings. She gasps as both of her hands cover her gaping, mortified mouth. Someone is coming down the stairs. Her eyes dart toward the stairwell, desperately attempting to adjust to the darkness. Trembling, she sees nothing. The steps grow louder and nearer. Paralyzed with fear, she is unable to utter a single syllable when suddenly the booming steps stop. And then nothing. Pure, dead silence. Suddenly, from a different part of the room, the swift pitter-patter of a child's running feet speed behind her, causing her once more to jump and twist around in complete fright and confusion. 2 people, she thought. Like a scared, injured dog, she frantically contorts her weak, exhausted body around every which way in complete fear of her company. It is quiet now, and she is terrified and alert. Suddenly, there is a sound. A warm breath grazes the nape of her neck. Sweat begins to drip from her temples as she slowly turns around to face the silhouette of a small boy standing less than 2 feet from her. He is draped in tattered rags, wrapped loosely in what appears to be a drab wool blanket. Sudden relief finds her like a cool breeze as her motherly instinct awakens. The boy says nothing, only standing there with a blank expression on his face. She leans toward the boy and is taken aback upon noticing that he is without half of his left arm. It is poorly bandaged, and although almost all of the light has left the room, the wound appears to be fresh and dripping. The boy's mouth forms into a grimace, then slowly evolves into a devious smile. His lips crack open and burst with a roaring laughter. Almost as quickly as it began, his laughter ceases, and his miniature eyes widen with utter horror. His little neck pops as he cocks his head to the side, and his eyes grow even wider. As she sits in quiet shock, sweat beads and drips from her brow. The warm, salty dew stings and burns as it falls into her eyes. She slowly turns around to a scene that could only be found in a nightmare. Before her stands a giant bearded man, no less than 7 feet tall. He is draped in filthy black cloth, and his face is unrecognizable, merely consumed with the bleak darkness of thick, matted whiskers. The terror in her soul cannot be measured. Her blood runs cold through her veins like an icy river. Her arms fall limp and lifeless to her side. The beastly man stands silent and stiff, like a corpse frozen in rigor mortis. The girl has never before seen a creature of this size or stature. The room falls silent, except for the light crackle of an ember popping in a pile of ash. A putrid stench suffocates the air, and the man remains as still as an ancient redwood. Time stops. The man's knees bend and slowly descend to the floor. The floorboards creak as his waist bends and his face moves closer to hers. Still, he is silent. His beard quivers and shakes as his hideous mouth opens and he wheezes and grins. The stench is nauseating. In one quick motion, he snaps his head towards the boy and fixates on him. His lips break the silence with two awful syllables. In a whispering, gravelly voice, he proclaims, "Dinner!" Fright pours over her as she swiftly whips around to behold the small boy with his arm raised above his head, clumsily wielding a fire poker like an axe. Thus ends The Mansion in Winter.
You've been listening to The Mansion in Winter, written by Gabriel Burkum and Randall J. Bell, read by Randall J. Bell. This program is copyright 2016 by Gabriel Burkum and Randall J. Bell.